Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Language of Leadership podcast. This is Mike here with Shanti Hershenson in Los Angeles in the US. So Shanti, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, I am super excited to chat with you today and learn from you about your journey as a writer, as a leader, and as an influence in your communities. Just by brief way of introduction, if my understanding serves me correctly, you have published or written over 14 different books, I think. You are cited all over the internet. You've been doing podcasts and videos and interviews, and you're a big inspiration for authors and writers and readers everywhere. Can you please just give us a brief introduction into who you are and how you got started being such a prolific writer?
All right. So, hi, my name is Shanti. I started writing, I'd say, in about the first grade when I would, we had free choice time, and I would go and I would gather all these papers and I would kind of bind them together in these little books. And actually, just recently, I found a bunch of them, and it was really exciting for me. And I used to write on line paper in elementary school, and of course, then computers. But when I started the sixth grade, I kind of that writing interest slowly developed in something a little more than just little writing and handwriting and drawing things. And in March of 2020, my friend and I published two books. They're really not that great. They're not like what my books are now. They're more average. They're really pretty short, but they led the way to writing 14 books. And nine of those have been published on Amazon. And I'm always writing more. I'm actually currently writing both my 15th and my 16th book. And I have a ton of new releases planned.
Incredible.
Thank you.
Well, let's dive into a little bit more about what type of books you like to read and write, and then we can zoom out a little bit to your writing process. So my understanding is that you're quite popular in the science fiction and fantasy and paranormal literature communities. Am I on the right track? Give us a little sense of what kind of books you like to write and read.
So my favorite genre to write and possibly read is dystopian science fiction. I love how it's kind of like fantasy, but it also isn't. It's not a whole new world you have to get used to. It's like your own, but it's also different in ways that are most often worse. So it's like, how can I take the world we have now and change it into something that's usually not too great? I think the majority of my novels really have been something along the lines of dystopian, alien invasion, straight up post-apocalyptic dystopian, this like kind of civil war like dystopian, and like they're all futuristic. I have one right now that's dystopian, but it's also very heavy sci-fi, so it's kind of like a whole new world, like a whole new planet at that point. I also really like paranormal fantasy, so I have this series called The Nightmare of Zil's Lane. It is both horror and fantasy, so I like calling it paranormal fantasy because they're ghosts and there's this whole other fantasy world, though it is more not as really in detail developed as maybe it could be, although possibly not. It's kind of like the villain's evil lair.
And so this series in particular, The Nightmare of Zile Delane, The Curse of Zile Delane, this is a series, and you also have some standalone books, if I'm correct, like You Won't Know Her Name and Biome Lock. So tell us a little bit about how you approach this writing process, the series, the standalone books, characters, world development. How do you think about it?
So, with the actually exception of Zile, all of the books I have that are series, cough cough, Biome Lock, were actually not supposed to be series. So Biome Lock was actually supposed to be this one giant novel. It was the first novel I ever wrote, and it started out as like this idea, and it was gonna be like this 20,000 word novella, and I kind of just, it was right in the middle of the pandemic and I was bored, had nothing to do. So I kept writing and I finished the first draft about maybe 100,000 words, which was a lot over what I originally thought. And then I went back and kept editing it, adding new things. It ended up being around 250,000 words. It's an 800-page novel originally. And that is way too long to publish. I don't know that many people that will finish an 800-page novel and then leave a review and actually recommend it. So I ended up splitting it into three books, and I actually ended up writing the fourth book later on, which is like a sequel to the original series.
Oh my goodness. And when you're writing so many words, I mean, tell us about your process. You've been quoted online as saying, for young writers or for any writers, it's really critical to write a certain amount of words every day. I'm just going to quickly quote you here. I think you were quoted as saying, "I know it sounds cliche, but never give up. Try to write a certain amount of words every day or as often as you can." So walk us through your writing process here.
So every day, no matter if I have school or if I have something, I try to write at least 1,000 words a day. It actually, I say it varies per book. There are some books that I'm more invested in and that I really just want to continue, and I'll write maybe 2,000 words a day. And if I have extra time or if I'm writing a scene I'm really excited about, I'll write more 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. So generally, I'd say 1,000 per day, like 1,000 words per day is a sweet spot. You can finish a book in a little over 2 months, maybe even less than. With that, you can, of course, you can do more, and even less. Even 500 words per day is something that works. It just 1,000 is really what works for me. It's the best way I can kind of see the word count go up, and I can also make progress. And that is by far the best thing that I've realized. When I was first writing Bioblock, I was kind of writing more in 100 words, maybe 200, whatever I did until I got bored. And I had to ditch that mindset because once I realized it literally only takes 30 minutes to write 1,000 words. It may take longer, but just to type that all out is only 30 minutes generally. And once I kind of realized that, I was able to finish my books a lot quicker. I was doing 30,000 words per month, and that's when the writing really took off.
Oh my goodness. Can you give us a little bit more insight into how you approach the books? Are you outlining this with Post-it notes or a whiteboard? Is it all up in your brain? Is it a lot of writing and then editing and doing it again? Like walk us through a 30 minutes or an hour of writing with Shanti as if we were looking over your shoulder.
So, I generally don't like to have many ideas of what's going to happen in a chapter before I start writing them. I usually like to just jump in and see where the story takes me, which is why I don't outline generally. I'm not that great of an outliner. Like, I cannot write down every single scene of a story. I just often when I start my books, I do not know how it ends. And that's honestly something that I'm grateful for because it allows also the reader to have more surprise, I feel like. Because when you know how it ends, maybe you're adding a little too much foreshadowing or you're kind of making everything have to happen a certain way. And I think it's more natural and it's better if you don't know how it ends, you don't know what's going to happen, you're just letting the characters kind of write the story for you. So when I sit down to write, I usually maybe have like one little idea of like what I think is going to happen. And I just write that. But often I'm trying to write the build up to the scene. I'm trying to get the characters to that scene, and that usually takes up my 1,000 words. So I'll either have to write more if it's getting late. I'll just be like, I'll do it tomorrow, and then the next day I'll still be working on that build up, and it will be the next day and the next day until I finally get to like that scene that I've been waiting to write.
Very cool. So you really allow the characters to drive the story rather than have it way preconceived. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%.
And tell us about the character development. How do you come up with these characters? Is it some other book or a movie that you've seen that gives you an idea for a character? Are you basing it off of your friends and family and you secretly don't tell them that they're the protagonist or the antagonist of the book? How do you come up with it?
So what I usually do is as soon as I have a new book idea, even if I'm not going to write it right away, if it's one I really really like, I will try to come up with a character. Usually it's just their name, and honestly the name changes a lot. Sometimes they have multiple names for the main character, and from then I try to figure out like what do they look like, because it's like I really see it's important that the reader can picture a character, and I like focus on the physical appearance first. But once I can do that, I can kind of go inside their head and be like, okay, what is this character like? What are they how do they act? What are some things they say a lot? And then from then, I can kind of be like, okay, I think this character's done. Then I move on to the other characters in the story, though often those characters don't even make it in the story. And then once I finally start writing it, if I do, I have some stories I've planned out that I haven't yet written. I will kind of be able to see like what are the characters' motivations, but I can't really do that until I know it's gonna happen.
And and tell us about the editing process. I've heard so many times and time and time again, and I think we all hear it as aspiring writers that editing is really where the books are made. You even hear quotes like, "There's no such thing as good writing, only good rewriting or good editing." Do you agree with that? Do you disagree? What's your editing
Kind
process
of.
like?
So
Yeah.
I am when I edit my books, what usually happens is I finish my books pretty quickly. I wrote one of my novels, The Accidental Insurgent, in 16 days. And because of that, I can't figure out what I'm going to change. It's very difficult for me to go back and change things. It's like I'm like, well, I like this line, I'm not going to change it. And story-wise, my books are very fast-paced, so it's like there's not any scenes I want to add. So what I do is maybe I give it one. I look at. I'll give like one look over. Perhaps I'll maybe want to add a scene, or I'll have, unless there's something really major in the story to change, like if I hate the writing style so much I just want to rewrite it all, I'll do that. If not, what I'll do is I'll go and I'll start a new book. That's probably why I have so many novels, is because I always like to go and start a new book, and then once I'm done with that, go back to the other one or another one that needs editing. I have some books I haven't touched in months. So
And what do your friends and family think about this? I mean, let's just call it what it is. You are a prolific author at a young age, probably in the 99.9th percentile of the sheer volume of words written and books published. When you tell your friends about this, and when you tell your family at, holiday gatherings, I mean, what's their reaction?
So my family's all pretty surprised. Honestly, I'm actually kind of surprised too. I didn't really see this coming. My friends, they're all super supportive. They're also they're pretty surprised. Because in sixth grade, I wasn't really vocal about wanting to write books. I don't even know if I really wanted to. It was just something that kind of happened. So, seventh grade was the middle of the pandemic. So basically, I started eighth grade with all these books written, and a lot of people didn't know and were very surprised to find out. Or maybe they followed me on Instagram and were like, wait, when did you start writing books? In my family, they're pretty surprised. They're all really supportive. My extended family is really supportive. They all buy and might read my books and they all give me feedback. But yeah, I don't think anyone really saw it coming. It's honest. It's a little more obvious actually if you look at some of my old projects. I keep thinking about them because I just found a whole bin full of my old writings and like these little booklets I made. And there's like an about the author section. There are all the other little booklets I've made on the back, and there's the blurb, and there's like everything. So it's like I kind of I knew it was going on. I just couldn't really actually get to writing real books until I turned 12 or 11.
Wow. Well, it does sound like you have a very supportive group around you in terms of encouraging and, allowing you to continue to do these things. I see a lot of books here in the background of this of this recording. What are your reading habits?
So I try to read every night before I fall asleep. Usually that's like the only time when I actually can. I don't have much time otherwise. I like reading a chapter per night often more. I read during school. I try to read is like anywhere I can, but also, I try to write everywhere I can. So it's like kind of complicated to be able to fit the two in. I like finishing a book per week. I read 61 books last year, and that's like the most I've done in a pretty long time. So I'm really happy about that. And yeah, I have some really silly reading habits, or I'll start freaking out over the books and start screaming about the books like in front of my whole family. It's very funny, but I get very invested in the book plots.
And what type of books do you like to read?
I really like science fiction, but I am also finding like a really like I don't know, I'm trying to figure out how to word it. I'm finding a kind of love for contemporary books, specifically ones that deal with social issues. I think it's quite interesting to read about real problems in our world that are presented through fiction. I also do. I've started to read a little more memoirs, also specifically on like social issues, because that's something I really like to read about and write about. But on a funner end, I do really like sci-fi and fantasy. Sometimes fantasy, it's so complexly written and there's so much about it that it's kind of hard to understand. So I have to go back and read it a bunch of times. Another reading habit I have to read the chapters multiple times, especially in fantasy.
I want to drill down a little bit on something you just mentioned about how real world social issues can be represented in fiction books, and especially sci-fi and fantasy. I mean, some books that jump to mind that are popular sci-fi books that explore real world themes are books like Orson Scott Card's Ender's Game and that series, or The Three Body Problem, Shanti here in China. Are there any particular books that you really identify with that are fiction books, but you can recognize some social themes in?
So my all-time favorite book is The Perks of Being a Wallflower, which obviously has got a lot of social themes in it. It's like the main character has, I think he probably has anxiety, he has depression. It's really interesting. It's really interesting to read about, but he's really nervous around people, and he has like kind of traumatic past. And it is actually I also really like how the book's written, and that's like the most interesting part is it's written, I feel like, as like a letter to the reader. So the reader feels really immersed in the story. And that book has been my favorite book. I read it for the first time in seventh grade, and I fell in love with it. So I reread it once a month maybe. I love rereading books too. So
Wow, brilliant. So that's definitely going to be on our recommendation list to all the listeners out there, The Perks
yeah.
of Being a Wallflower. To change gears a little bit, Shanti, I'd love to ask you about leadership. You've, in your own words, come with a somewhat unexpected last 24 months, but also there was a little bit of foreshadowing when you were a little bit younger. And now it's clear that you are a leader within your community. I'm curious, how do you think about that? How do you define leadership and your influence on other people within the writer and reading community?
Well, I describe my influence particularly as someone that people can really be inspired by. I like inspiring people via TikTok. I like making TikToks about my books and actually writing tips. I love helping people with their writing. A lot of people I think just believe they're really bad writers and they need to be kind of led into the direction that like everyone's a bad writer at one point. You're probably not. I'm convinced every writer thinks they're a bad writer. I have times where I'll like stare at my writing. I'll be like, this is horrible. What am I doing? Even with my published books too. So it's kind of like I like, I guess, leading people in different ideas. I like also leading teen writers because I like, and teaching them because I you can't be too young to write a book. That's the thing. You can't be too young, you can't be too old to write a book because it's something that I think honestly I think anyone can do it if they have the kind of motivation to and the skill set to, which of course that takes time to develop. But it's something that's both incredibly difficult and it's easier than people think. And definitely, I guess I describe a leader as someone who can inspire and motivate people and help them too, instead of just sitting there and being like, well, I'm inspiring, be inspired, but also like, here, I can help you.
I love that. It's the spirit of being useful and the spirit of actually driving people to take action. Um, and with your TikTok channel and with your other interviews and such, one thing I appreciate is that you're very just unapologetic, right? Hey, this is who I am, and not everyone's gonna love the writing that I do, but if you do, here I am, and here's how I can and influence you. How do you think about that authenticity now that you have such a big audience globally?
It's surprising. I get worried sometimes. Like, I can't focus on the people that aren't gonna like my books. They're gonna be like, "Oh, you're too young to be an author." Like, this is who I am. I'm an author. It's not something that I'm ever going to apologize for. I'm not gonna be like, "Oh, yeah, sorry. Maybe my book isn't what you hoped for. You didn't like it." I'm 14. I was 13 when I wrote the majority of my published books. Actually, all of my published books at this point were written when I was 13. So it's like that was who I am, and it's still who I am. And yeah, like I think I can't try to wait until I'm older and wait till my writing is better because right now I think my writing is already very good. And I can't like hide who I am. I can't be like, oh yeah, I'm the kid who wants to be a writer when I'm older. No, I'm gonna be a writer now if I can.
I love that. I love that, and it goes back to something you said before about you're never too young, you're never too old to write a book. You are gonna seize the moment now and just do it while the mood, so strikes. Have you taken this philosophy from other people or other places in life? Have you always been this proactive person with initiative? Do you feel like you get it more and more, kind of like flexing a muscle as you write more and more books? I mean, to be honest, it sounds great in theory, but for many of us, it might be kind of daunting to simply be fearless and take those steps. What type of sharing or experiences might you be able to offer for someone who says, I'm inspired by Shanti writing those books, but I don't know where to start?
I think honestly, you're not going to get anywhere unless you put the words on paper. I was at one point when I was first starting Biomlock, particularly, where I was like, I don't think this is going anywhere. It's not that great. Except you're not gonna, you're not gonna be great originally. You have to keep working, and yeah, it is. I feel like each time I write a book, I think it gets easier. It's like your first book is gonna be the hardest, and the next ones are just gonna it's gonna keep getting easier and easier, and you're gonna be able to write more and more. And it's something you can't be good at like originally. You have to improve, and you have to be writing so much. Like if you look at my writing from say the Nightmare of Ziles Elaine to the writing in the book that's gonna be published next, The God's Right Hand, it is so different and it's like so it's improved so much. And it's like, yeah, you just have to kind of take that leap and you can't I guess another thing is you can't focus on what other people think. You can't let like one bad review get you down or one hate comment on TikTok get you down. It's like you have to ultimately write for you and you have to write because it makes you happy, not because I guess you want to be famous.
Can we dive a little bit deeper on that? Because there is so much to learn, I think, from what you just said, that the haters or the peanut gallery or whoever they are going to throw cheap shots all the time, especially when they can hide behind a digital avatar. And you're being so brave and putting yourself out there. Yet for many of us, it's paralyzing, right? We don't want to put our work out on TikTok or we don't want to publish our work because we're afraid of what other people think. And I think if most of us are honest with ourselves, we do care about other people's opinions of us. How do you sort of balance that, wanting the accolades or the feedback from your audience or readers with also being true to yourself and saying, forget the haters, forget the posters on my TikTok or on Goodreads?
So in the moments when I'm really upset over, say, a negative, I've actually only gotten one negative review or a negative rating because some people just rate your books and not say anything. In the moments when I'm upset about that, and I'm like, wait, why am I even writing books if people are going to hate on them or people aren't going to like them? I think back to my fourth grade self who used to think about, writing this quick little book and putting it online. And like I used to think about publishing books. I used to think about the day when I could publish a book. And that it never mattered to me if I had a good review or not. It just mattered to me that I got to hold this physical piece of writing in my hand that had a really pretty cover and had my name on it. Every time I think back to that, because ultimately it doesn't matter what other people think if it's making you happy, unless it's harming someone, then don't do it. Um, but honestly, and right now, I guess, because I don't have to worry about money as much, it only matters that I'm like inspiring, say that one person that's going to read my book and enjoy it. Because there are some people who leave comments and like, oh my gosh, I loved your book. It was so good. And that's what like matters to me more than like multiple people hated it. Because actually, I don't get that many bad reviews, but each time they do hurt. So
I love that. I love that. As long as you're making somebody happy, remember why you started, right? I started writing to be a writer, to make people happy, to inspire people, to tell stories. And there just might be some people who don't like it, and that's okay. But I'm gonna keep doing me. Did I get it right?
yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Shanti, I know you have many more books to write and many words to get down on your paper, but a few more questions I think we'd love to learn about you is when you're going through this writing process and thinking about who you want to be in the future. Are you planning for the long term and saying, I want to write 100 books or I want to be the most prolific author that's ever lived? Are you saying, I'm just going to focus on this one book and maybe the next one together? How do you go about planning and thinking about a range of time?
I think that all of this right now is leading up to the day when I'm old enough that I can get traditionally published. Because right now all my books are self-published. I haven't approached a publisher yet. I'm a little nervous too, and because I'm a kid, it's easier if I can, get all these books out and don't have to worry about someone telling me it needs to change. But once I'm older, if self-publishing is not really big for me, I'm definitely thinking of trying to, get my work traditionally published. Of course, by then I think I'll be a much better writer and I'll be a lot more popular and I'll have this whole platform built. I'll have all these books out. I'll have this whole portfolio essentially of all these books instead of maybe just one. Although maybe I sometimes I wonder if I should spend more time on my books. I think they're all pretty polished. But yeah, ultimately, maybe when I'm 16 or 18, I'll be able to get traditionally published, and then I'll be able to kind of I'll slow down a little then. But I also have a ton. I don't want to know how many books I'll have by then. It's going to be a ton.
Well, on that, I wanna I wanna bring up an excerpt from one of your published works. You won't know her name, because I feel this really magically encapsulates your spirit of openness and writing and sharing. The excerpt is, "What does silence do in a world where we were born to speak?" It's a brilliant, brilliant line. It's an amazing question. Tell us about that.
So that was written from I do a lot of poetry. So that was from one of my poems, Silence, and that poem is about feeling like it's actually more about my school, feeling like they don't want me to speak out because we have a lot of problems in our school, and I've spoken out about them, and I've gotten in trouble, and I've had people be like, "Oh, it's not your problem," even though it is. And I wrote that line actually, I think, in the car on the way home from school when I wasn't that happy, and I was just really upset. And I was angry, and I wrote that line. I actually ended up adding it to the poem called Silence, and then, of course, adding it to You Won't Know Her Name. And actually, Silence is both in You Won't Know Her Name and it's like Poetry Companion. I Know Her Names. That poem's everywhere. It's not actually my favorite poem. I have a different poem of mine that's my favorite. But that poem was like just about my school, and that line was of course in there. And that line is completely like relevant to You Won't Know Her Name, and it also sometimes reminds me of like my books. Like I'm not gonna, be silent, not do anything. Like I'm born to speak and I'm born to write. So
That's amazing. Well, on that note, what is one piece of leadership or advice, guidance that you would give to fellow students if you had to summarize, Shanti's leadership philosophy?
So, especially in school, I'd say that I don't want to stay quiet about problems I have. As someone who identifies as a leader, I want to speak out and I want to make improvements and I want to make a change. Honestly, the only reason why I've stayed in the school I'm in is to try to make a change because we have a lot of bullying problems and we have a lot of things that aren't too great within our community. And it's like, why walk away? Like, I want to lead this community into a better direction. I want to make a difference. And I think if you see something that's going on that you don't like, to make a difference, stand up for it. Just like do what you know is right. And in that way, like, yeah, lead your community. I'm starting an anti-bullying committee in my community. And I'm going to lead it. I'm also I Yeah, pretty much that.
That's amazing. Well, Shanti, you've already inspired so many people who have read your work, who are looking up to you as a leader within your community, and you're already taking more proactive steps to improve the life of fellow students at school. It's something I think we can all learn from and something that we can look to as a guiding light, no matter how old we are. As you said, you're never too young, you're never too old to write a book. The first one is going to be the most challenging, but keep going, keep persisting, and maybe one day we will end up like you with 14 or more different books. Where can we go to find out more information about your work? Your website, your TikTok? Let us know how we can follow you.
So the biggest way you can like find all my books in one place, actually, I don't remember if my website is outdated or not. I sometimes forget to update it. But my website is shantihershenson.com, ShantiHershenson.com. That website has like updates occasionally. It has everything. It has all my interviews. You can also go to my Instagram at Shanti Hershenson and my TikTok. That has been one of my main focuses, primarily for marketing, is TikTok. I'm almost to 18,000 followers, and my TikTok is at Shanti Who Writes. I honestly, if you want to get in touch with me, like comment on one of my videos, say hi, or message me on Instagram. But particularly for TikTok, I post a lot of writing tips on there because I like leading people and I like helping them, and just answering people's questions and giving posting all these videos on different writing things. And actually, I just did one on how to get your books in a bookstore. So if you're a new author, maybe you're a teenager, whatever, and you want to learn about all this kinds of stuff, go to my TikTok. I post pretty much every day. So
Amazing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Shanti Hershenson, you know where to find her and you know where to get your daily dose of inspiration. Shanti, thank you so much for taking time to speak with us today, and
thank you
look
for
forward
having me.
to following all of your future successes.
Thank you so much.